What's up everyone? Today we are doing a little bit of a different video. A nice little break from the past few PK videos. I can see this video being pretty controversial, but just remember, this is my opinion. By no means are we ever going to get probably any of these updates, and this is simply my opinion. Today we're going to be talking about if you could pick 5 updates from Pre-Eoc, what updates would you bring over to Old School? So I'm going to give my top 5 updates that I would bring over to Old School RuneScape. Post down in the comments what the 5 you would bring over. So I'm going to start off at number 5 and go up to number 1. 1 being the one I want the most, 5 being the one I want the least out of these 5. So at the number 5 spot, we have lending. Back in the other RuneScape, there was a system where you could lend items to other players, and it was like built into the game. So you couldn't get scammed. You could lend someone an item for 4 hours or something, and after 4 hours, that item would automatically be returned to you. I can't remember if there was any restrictions on what items that you could lend. Of course, you could only lend tradable items, but out of the tradable items, I'm not sure if there was any limits. I don't remember any. The positive effects of this on the game were it raised the prices of items, which means that you would make more money from PVM. It allowed you to make some easy side money if you had these items to lend out, because what happened when this system came into the game was people would go to World 2, they would advertise which items they're lending out. They would lend them out for a certain price per hour. So if you had these items, you could just lend them out for a day. If you had like an extra twisted bow in Old School, you could lend it out for, the entire day for a couple mil. That's a free couple mil for doing basically nothing. Another positive effect of this update was it allowed people to use items, expensive items that they would never be able to get on their own, and they wouldn't have to have some rich friend that would trust them. So beginners and everyone in the game had a chance to use the best weapons in the game. Another positive effect is if there is a very volatile item and you don't want to own that item, you could go and rent it from someone, and that way if it crashes, it doesn't matter to you because you're just renting it. And then I would say the negative effects of this update were it raised the price of items. So that was one of the benefits, but it is also a negative because if you're a poorer player, that means it's harder to get the items in the first place if you want to buy them. Then next, it also makes it so items aren't as rare. Like pretty much any player would have a chance to use an item in the game, no matter how much it costs to buy it, because they could just go and rent it for a much smaller amount of money. So it kind of took away the uniqueness and rareness that high-priced items had. Next up, at the number 4 spot, I have Summoning. Summoning was released early 2008, so just a few months after where our Old School version began from. And what Summoning did, it allowed you to summon familiars that would follow you around, and each one had special effects and certain abilities. You would train it by killing monsters and getting charms, and then getting secondaries and fusing those into a pouch, and the pouches were what you would use to summon familiars. So the benefits of Summoning was, for me, it was honestly fun to use and to get up and unlock new creatures that you can summon, the Bunyip, the Unicorn, the Titans, the Beast of Burdens, the Yak. Just as you level it up, you are constantly unlocking new monsters that have new abilities. So I thought it was pretty fun. Yet another thing to train up and have fun with. Summoning also made some new PK builds, unique PK builds. The Summoning tanks added some variety to the wilderness. Summoning also was very good for the economy and useless items, because a lot of useless items that had no use, they made those as secondaries to the pouches that you make. So things like granite that have no use, those became an ingredient to make some of the pouches, which means they had value, which means people could go and mine granite and make money. And there was just a whole bunch of different useless items that became valuable and new money makers for people to go and take advantage of. Some of the downsides of Summoning, though, were it kind of made combat level confusing at some places. Some places you'd be level 130, and then other places you'd be like level 120 plus 10 or something like that. And then next, it also made bosses easier because Summoning familiars were quite helpful at bosses. Next up, at the number 3 spot, we have the Curse Prayers. There was a quest that came along with these, Temple of Senistin or something like that. And what they were they were a whole new prayer book, kind of like when you do Desert Treasure, you unlock the Ancient spell book. This was like a new prayer book. They were all high-level prayers. And the positives that this update had were it gave a whole bunch more variety to the wilderness. Now instead of Now you had a choice. You know, if you were making a Berserker account, did you want to go 75 attack, 99 strength, 52 prayer? Or did you want to go like 60 attack, 90 strength, 95 prayer? So there's more choices. There's different kinds of builds in the wilderness, which I am a fan of. I like it when there's a lot of variety instead of just the same old cookie cutter accounts. It actually gave value to high level prayers. Prayer currently cuts off in Old School at level 77 with Augury. Past that, there is no benefits. Personally, I'd like to see every skill filled out all the way up to 99 or at least like mid 90s. So it kind of sucks that it stops at level 77. This would give value to higher level prayer. Then the negatives of the cursed prayers were it increased DPS. I mean, prayer is a combat skill, so it's kind of hard to get around that if you want to give prayer value at the higher levels. And then another big negative was Soul Split. That one was just a little too overpowered. What Soul Split did was it healed you based on how much damage you did, which was very overpowered for Slayer or bosses or just many places in the game. Next up, number 2 slot. I'm probably going to get a lot of hate, a lot of controversy over this pick, but at my number 2 spot, I have Restricted Trade. And what this was back in, like, I think at the end of 2007 or maybe early 2008, made it so that you couldn't give items or money away to people. Every trade had to be within 30k value of each other. That went off the Grand Exchange. I can't remember the exact reasons why they did it. I think it had to do with real world trading and stolen credit cards and a bunch of stuff like that. And it's why they took the Wilderness away. I wasn't a fan of that. But we did end up getting Bounty Hunter Wilderness later on, which I did really enjoy. I enjoyed the EP system and the DP system and getting statuettes and stuff from PKing. So what are the positives and negatives of the restricted trade? These are my opinions. But for positive, I would say that you had to work for your money yourself. You couldn't buy it from a gold selling website. You couldn't buy it with bonds. You couldn't get it from a friend. You couldn't go to the duel arena and just get lucky and make a bunch of money because you're willing to risk your money. No, you had to go and actually play the game, make the money yourself, which is really big and why it's at my number 2 spot. The fact that people can just go to the duel arena and become super rich in a very short period of time because they are willing to lose their money and they get lucky, that bothers me more than I would like to say. Another positive in today's landscape of RuneScape is it makes alts not as useful. You can't just go and make money on an alt and transfer it to your main account. You have to make the money on your main account for the most part. And some people will just say go play Iron Man if that's how you feel. There's a very, very big difference between Iron Man and having restricted trade on a main account. Just because one element is similar doesn't make them the same thing. And then on to the negatives of restricted trade. First, you couldn't transfer wealth between your own accounts. This was kind of a positive with the alts, but it's kind of annoying if you have like PK builds and you just want to go PK on your Zerker account and you can't give that account some PK supplies. Next, drops in the Wilderness would have to change back to how the Bounty Hunter worlds worked in like 2010, which would be bad for risk fighting mainly because you probably wouldn't get the item that your opponent is risking. And then the next negative is junk trading. When items had a really high demand, their prices would go above the GE price, but you had to trade them at the GE price. So what that did was it made it so that junk trading became a thing. And what people would do is they would get a whole bunch of junk that was worth a lot and was really easy to obtain, and they would add that onto the trade. So if you were selling an LE for 1 bill, but the GE price only said 500 mil, you'd add on 500 mil in junk. And that whole system was a little annoying. Next up, at the number 1 spot. This one is probably the most likely update to actually come to Old School. The other ones probably won't ever have them, but this one actually has a chance. And that is the Completionist Cape, as it was in Pre-Eoc. So I'd love it to have the color picking options, the particle trail. Those were, I don't know why they're kind of just little tiny details, but for me, that'd be a big deal to have those or not to have them. They kind of set the cape apart and really made it special, or at least look special, made it look unique. And the best in slot stats for, of course, the hardest cape in the game to achieve. As far as the positives and negatives for the comp cape, there isn't too many. I mean, this one isn't as intrusive, or it won't have as big of an impact as the previous mentioned updates. I mean, it's a cape. That's what it is. It's a cape. So positives, it gives something nice for people who complete the game. Negatives, it kind of makes people feel like they need to complete the game so that they can have the best in slot cape. But that is pretty much it for this video. and my top 5 updates I'd bring over from Pre-Eoc. Probably none of these are going to happen. This was just my opinion. Comment down below the 5 that you'd bring over to Oldschool. Thank you for watching, like the video, subscribe, and see you tomorrow.